Welcome. Welcome. I saw a lot of posts flying around, both on Facebook and in the WhatsApp groups, about what to do on vacation when you go on vacation on Hanukkah. And I thought, what an interesting question. There must be sort of a halachic answer to that. So I set out to look at I had some like hazy memories of different halachic principles about Hanukkah. And I think that what I ended up with is a halacha shir that is also not really a halacha shir, because I think that halacha is often an expression of our values, hopefully, right? When like it sort of everything comes together in the right way. And Hanukkah, I think, raises a lot of interesting value, community-based questions around the halacha of candle lighting. So I gave us a source sheet full of halacha, and I don't know if that went out ever. Let me see if I can share a link, and then I'll also share my screen.
We don't know.
You do have it?
No, I'm saying we have another person joining.
Oh, hello. Oh, hey, another friend. How lovely. Okay, I'm going to copy the link and paste it in here. So the source sheet looks like a halacha source sheet, but I want to push us to think about the values that are driving the choices that are made, and what that means. So before I even I shouldn't have posted it. Before we go to the source sheet, I think that the overlying question of candle lighting is whether this is a mitzvah for a person, a chovat gavra, or whether it's a mitzvah on an object, a chovat chafza. And in this case, the object is your house, right? And so another example, right, of a chovat chafza or a chovat bayit is putting up a mezuzah, right? And so when you're a guest at someone else's home, certainly like for lunch, but even if you're on vacation at their house, you don't put up your own mezuzah when you walk in the door, right? It's an obligation on the house, and it has fulfilled its obligation, and that's how it goes. A chovat gavra, right, is really totally dependent on you. So when you go daven at someone else's house, you bring your own tefillin and you wrap tefillin, even if your host is also wrapping tefillin. So that is, and it's a little bit unclear where the Hanukkah candle lighting falls in that dichotomy, right? And the implications will help us decide who lights candles when, for whom, and all of those pieces. I decided not to dwell. The other note is on the women, afhein hayuba oto hanes, because that could, we could go down a whole rabbit hole there. So we're just going to say now that women are also obligated. So when we talk about adults lighting for each other, I don't really mean like, can a woman light for a man or a man for a woman? That's actually sort of accepted at the Gemara level. But more, when you have adults, can you have an agent to light candles for you? Okay. So now I will share my screen and we can jump into the sources. So another interesting note, and my last disclaimer, I'm glad to say it on recording, I am not paskening halacha for anyone at this moment. If you have questions, you should call Rav Ari or me, and I will work in consultation with Rav Ari, but this is more exploration and theory as opposed to like actually what one should do in any moment. Although certainly we could talk about cases. Okay, all disclaimers aside. So all of the discussion about Hanukkah that takes place in the Gemara takes place in Masechet Shabbat. Unlike some of the other Yamim Tovim, there is no Masechet dedicated to Hanukkah. It just slipped in with other candle lighting practices. And here, right away, we see sort of the haziness of whether this is a mitzvah gavra or chatza, because Tanu Rabbanan mitzvah Hanukkah ner ish uveto, right? So I bolded and underlined to sort of indicate the two different options, right? One is it's a mitzvah of a person, and the other is it's a mitzvah of his household. And then we go into the mahadrin, right? So that's the baseline mitzvah, is one candle per house. Then the mahadrin level is ner l'kol echad ba'achad, which might be interpreted as reading this as a mitzvah gavra, right? Because then each person lights one candle. If you look in someone's window, you will know if there are 5 candles, 5 people who are obligated to light candles live in that house. So that's an interesting possibility. V'hamahadrin min hamahadrin Beit Shammai omrim yom rishon madlik shmona mikam be'elech pochet v'holech uBeit Hillel omrim yom rishon madlik echat mikam be'elech mosif v'holech. And the highest level, this or perhaps sort of distinct level of mahadrin min hamahadrin, there's a debate which we're also not going to go into about whether you go up or down, right? We know that we go up, is about lighting the number of candles per night. And so perhaps, right, that if you are someone who believes that this is a mitzvah on your house, then in your house, if you're mahadrin min hamahadrin, you will light 1 candle per night. So 1 on the first night, 2 on the second night, right? If you're someone who believes that this is a mitzvah gavra, then on the first night, you will light 1 candle times the number of people who live there, and so on and so forth. But they're not necessarily building on each other, these levels. And so this is where we're left. And it's sort of unclear what is the best choice, and whether it's the ish or the bait that sort of wins out. So the Rambam is pretty unequivocal. He strongly believes, right, that this is a house. How many candles should one light on Hanukkah? 1 candle should be lit in each and every house, regardless of whether there are many members of the household, right? So for the Rambam, it's pretty straightforward that this is a mitzvah beito, a mitzvah chavza. And the Shulchan Aruch, as is the normal standard, decides to follow the Rambam, follows the Rambam's psak halacha, saying that, right, that it's 1 candle per house on the first night, and then either continuing with 1 or escalating per night. But the Rama adds a vayesh omrim, right? Some say, dechol echad mibnei habayit yadlik. And interestingly, the Rama also cites the Rambam, not because the Rambam believes that, but because the Rambam, after this portion, adds that he has seen that lots of people do this other thing, right? So it seems like the Rambam believes this, but he also sort of records what's happening in the world, which has a strong impact on halacha, and that is that each person lights their own, and that's what the Rama actually believes that we should do, right? V'chein haminhag kapashut. This is like the widespread custom amongst us, but he cites this interesting idea that you don't want to lose the distinction of nights and people in this bonfire of candle lighting that might take place in your house. And so he says, maybe everyone should take care to place their lights in a unique place, so it will be apparent how many lights they are kindling, right? So if it's the 3rd night and there are 3 people in your home, there are going to be, right, 12 candles, right? 3 nights plus 3 shamashes. And so the Rama is suggesting, and I've never seen anyone do this, like I think most people like myself have set up some kind of table and everyone's Chanukiot are sort of close together. But I think he's suggesting everyone should light in their own window or their own room. Again, so because the whole drive of this mitzvah is outward facing, everyone is I think cautious to want to understand what will the person who walks by on the street think when they walk by your house. And so if it's the 2nd night and there are 2 people in the house, you don't want anyone to think it's the 5th night with 1 shamash. You want, because not everyone has like fancy Chanukiot like they do now, right? So it's just like a line of candles, and they are the Rama really wants to keep the cheftzat gavra, that sort of individual personship, alive. So that is on the face of it what it is, right? Who should light candles? Everyone who's an adult, according to the Rama, or every household should light 1, according to the Shulchan Aruch. That's pretty straightforward. And if you stayed home for all of Hanukkah and you always arrived home by 4:53, which I think was tonight the earliest or the time that you should light candles in Skokie, right? Then you would, that I think that's pretty clear. If you're Sephardi, you'll do 1. If you're Ashkenazi, you'll do many. The questions that get interesting are both when you are delayed. So for example, right, if Dan is stuck at work doing important life-saving medicine, and the zman of the ideal time to light candles is passing, should Dan appoint a shaliach in Debbie to light candles for him on his behalf? Or is it better for him to wait to come home, right? That's like one sort of interesting wrinkle. Or, Jerry and Tamar decide to go to the Bahamas. They've been isolated long enough. They're going out. Should they light candles in the Bahamas? I haven't seen this anywhere, but I think it's an interesting question. Should they have to hire someone to light candles in their home, right? If we think this is a mitzvah beito, then perhaps just like you get a plant waterer, maybe they need a candle lighter to come to their house and sort of light their candles for them. Yeah, Dan.
How come they get to go to the Bahamas and I have to stay late at work?
Life is not fair, Dan. Don't worry, you could go somewhere soon in another case. Right, so those are maybe the classic ones. I saw someone post that I think unfortunately her mother-in-law was in the hospital, right? And so, if you're in the hospital, should you light candles in the hospital? If you have someone in your home waiting for you, should they light on your behalf? These are sort of some of the questions. And then the classic one, right, of a student or a soldier who is living somewhere else. And then the added question sort of arises of, should you light where you eat or should you light where you sleep if those places are different? So to get there, we have to go back to the Gemara. And Rav Sheshet introduces the idea that an achsanai, a guest in someone's home, chayav b'ner Chanukah, indicating that perhaps he believes that this is a mitzvah on the person. And Amar Rabbi Zera gives a great sort of personal history. Me reish ki havena be Rav, right? When I was studying in the yeshiva, Mishtatatfana prite bahade ushpiza. I would participate with prutot. I would give money together with the host to light the candles, meaning he would say, here's some money so that you can buy some candles, and that way I am a part of your mitzvah. Again, indicating a strong belief that this is on the person, not the house. Otherwise, he should be able to just sit and watch. Batar denisibe itata amena. After I married my wife, I said, I don't have to do this anymore. Right? She lights on my behalf at home. So even though we know that women are obligated, I think this is really interesting because this is in the real time, Rabbi Zera is trusting his wife to light properly, to say the right brachot, and to have sort of that agency for him. But also that as soon as he's married, he feels like he doesn't have to light anymore in his house. So we see this reflected in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Rambam also, but the Rambam is very similar to the Shulchan Aruch here. I didn't feel like I had to bring both for you. And so then there are many questions about what kinds of guests, right? So if you have gone somewhere, can't leave you out, Alexander. Let's see, if Alexander goes to a friend's home where he enters through the front door and stays in a room in the a beautiful in-law suite in the basement, right? That's sort of one scenario, meaning he has no entrance. I guess that has no room to himself, right? Maybe he has to bunk in with his friend's, 10-year-old son, whatever it is. I think that it was not common for people to have their own rooms at that time. But if he has his own entrance, that's sort of a separate thing. So I was thinking motel versus hotel maybe is probably a way of thinking about it, right? If you have or if you rent a villa, let's dream bigger than a motel. And so there's no common entrance, there's just your own entrance. That's a little bit different. Right, so the guest that doesn't have a room and whose home does not light for him, right? So here we see the Shulchan Aruch's preference for mitzvah chefta on the bayit, because as long as there's a bayit lighting for you, there's actually no need for you to light yourself. But then you should give in your pruta to buy into the menorah, into the Chanukiah, if you have no person to light for you at home. If you have your own entrance, then you should light in your entrance. Even though, right, he's saying it's you light where you sleep, but you're going to go into it's like a bed and breakfast. You're going to go into the dining room in the morning and eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner there. And so perhaps you might think that that's the right thing, right? That's where you light. No, really, you should light where you sleep. Of course, the Ramah says an interesting thing, right? No, it's not where you sleep, it's where you eat, because we actually kindle our lights inside, madlichin befanim, right? And so people have made it a custom to eat inside. So I think that here we see another interesting piece, which is a reminder of this Pirsume Nisa objective, right? If this is a mitzvah on your house, you sort of understand why you are supposed to light in roughly the same place you put your mezuzah, right? You're supposed to light in your doorway, in like the entrance to the house. Once you're lighting in the window, where you might still be doing Pirsume Nisa, but you have a different group of people that you might be publicizing to, right? I.e. the people in your own home, like especially if you live in a high-rise apartment and no one can see your thing from the street, or you live in like a, a neighborhood where your window faces the brick wall of, the apartment next door. That then maybe you should actually light where you eat instead. And so I think thinking about like, what does it mean to call something a home? Is it the place where you put your head on the pillow? Is it the place where you eat dinner? Is it a place where you have your own entrance? Right? I just think those are interesting parameters of thinking about what it means to be sort of in charge of your own space. When you think about living in a dormitory, right, that is like totally not your own space on some level. And you eat in a dining hall. So interestingly, Rav Ovadia and Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach agree that if you are Sephardi and unmarried, then you should not light candles on your own at all, right? Because you have someone lighting for you at home. And the Ashkenazi practice is that they should be lit. Although some people say maybe if you live most of your year away from your parents, maybe like you actually don't even fall under their bait anymore if you're not going home every Shabbat, right? And I'm trying to find my note here that the Igrot Moshe, so Rav Moshe Feinstein, says that you light where you sleep. And he said that the students should draw lots to see who has to stay in the room until the candles burn out. Right. So imagining that like you're in YU and there are 5 guys living in one apartment. And so he says, well, even if you don't eat there, right, you only sleep there, you still have to light the candles, and it's dangerous to leave them. So someone will have to remain behind during dinner to be there. Right. And the Chazon Ish actually follows the Ramah and says, no, actually you light where you eat. Right. So I think that these things are sort of complicated. Then if you have a meal at someone else's home, right? So you'll sleep in your own bed at your own house, but you're eating dinner as an achsanai, as a guest in someone else's home. Should you light in their house, right? I will say that is how my family lit candles, right? When we went to my aunt's for our Hanukkah party, we all lit candles in the same place. Or should you light where you sleep, right? Again, I think that this tiny little paragraph, has all of these questions that sort of come out of it. That have broader implications. And then we get to my favorite part, which is about the brachot, right? So the Shulchan Aruch says that there's a yesh omrim, there are some who say, that even though someone is lighting in their house, right, fulfilling the mitzvah of the bayit, if he is in a place where there are no other Jews, which I think means there are no other Chanukiot out, he should light and with a bracha. So the reason I love the question of the brachot is because I think it shows what is most important to these rabbis who are making these decisions. That's like the litmus test. You could say, okay, light your menorah if it makes you feel better. But if you're going to say a bracha, they really want it to be the right thing to do. And so it becomes this sort of lightning rod for the Rebbeim. And so this idea that the Shulchan Aruch is saying, right, you have already discharged your obligation at your home because your wife or spouse or child lit for you, if no one else will light candles in the place where you are. So let's say you've gone on vacation to, I don't know, South Dakota or something, right? Where I don't imagine there's a large Jewish community, but the Badlands are really cool, right? And so you go there. And so the Shulchan Aruch is saying that maybe the mitzvah of Pirsume Nisa is so great that you actually have an obligation to light there. So I don't know what that means about like where your home is, right? Is your home where you can be a shaliach for the Jewish people? But that's an interesting wrinkle. And the Ramah actually says that he is obligated to see the lights. And so that explains a little bit of why if there's no separate entrance and you're eating with your hosts, that you've already seen the lights. And so maybe that's why you just chip in. Whereas if you live in your own spot or you eat by yourself, then you would want to see the lights. And even if he is near Jews and can see the lights, if he wants to be machmir, al atzmo, then he could make them for himself and he can recite the bracha on them, v'chein nohagin. Right, so most Ashkenazim, if they are traveling, even if they have someone who is at home and who can light for them, they will light wherever they go, which is how you end up lighting candles in like hotel lobbies or in the sink of your, hotel bathroom because you're nervous about the fire. And it's why people get in trouble, every year for lighting candles in their dormitories, because they feel like they have this chayat, because again, you're supposed to say the bracha here. And the Mishnah Berurah is very careful to say, no. We'll come back to this one. Don't say the bracha, right? This is dangerous. You fulfilled your obligation. How can we possibly say that you should be saying the bracha now? And so what he says, right, is that there are those who disagree, right? Because the person is no longer obligated, right? Pataruhu, he's patur, al yedei hadlakat ishto, because his wife already lit candles on his behalf at home. So if you don't want to fulfill your obligation with your wife, you should light candles without a bracha. And I think that there is like a strong emotional component here. You want to light candles. It's Hanukkah. It's like what you're supposed to be doing. And so to go on vacation and not light candles feels kind of like sad. And I think that is a part of like the Mishnah Berurah is owning that. Like people are going to want to light candles anyway. It's not a onerous mitzvah, right? This is like a mitzvah of happiness. And so if you're on vacation, like let's imagine Dan goes skiing with half of his kids, but Debbie stays home with the other half, right? So you have someone at home who's lighting, but you're in your cute, ski bungalow, and it doesn't feel like Hanukkah if you don't like the candles. And so you feel kind of stuck. And so I think the Mishnah Berurah is giving you like this halachic out. Fine, light the candles, but don't say the bracha, because then you've said a bracha levatala. But he also has to admit that this is like a strong practice of the Achronim to allow it. So, right, we can't push too much against these people, right? Because lots of Achronim agree with that. But the best out, in my opinion, in any event, it would be better to either just say Amen to the other people who light candles with you, or you should make sure to light your candles before your wife or husband lights his at home. Because if you sort of jump the gun, then no one's lit on your behalf. No one's lit on your behalf. And the person at home has the chiyuv to light for your bayit. So they get to say the bracha. And so everyone can sort of say their bracha. And I really think that this is not just because people might have a misunderstanding, but because people want to say the brachot and they want to light candles. So two interesting cases, right? The first one, sorry. I am nervous about teaching halacha. Does anyone have any questions, comments, thoughts? I usually would pause right around here.
Rabbanit Yael.
Yeah, yes, Tamar.
Some people, I think some people light electric menorahs. Is that ever acceptable? I mean, is that acceptable halachically by any authority?
Great question. So I just read an interesting tshuva. Rabbi Linzer at Yeshivat Chovei Torah, I think he's done a whole series on Rabbi Toledano, who was a big posek, I think. I don't have his dates on hand, where he and someone has translated Rabbi Toledano's psak, and then Rabbi Linzer offers some like framing comments. And so what I read about electric lights was that this is a similar, right? You can sort of understand why the Gemara falls into Shabbat. So it's a similar question as to Shabbat about electricity. So if you're lighting LED lights, those, now I'm going to get them mixed up, right? There's two kinds of lights, LED lights and the other kinds. Someone help me out.
Incandescent.
Incandescent, thank you. So most people agree that when you turn on an incandescent light, it's as though you've lit a fire. Incandescent light bulbs get hot to the touch, I believe. And so it's considered being over on the mitzvah of Bona Ish on Shabbat to turn on an incandescent light. An LED light, on the other hand, is not a real fire, and so it's not considered as much of an issue. And so the psak of Rabbi Linzer was that if you must light a non-fire Chanukiah, it's better to use one with incandescent light bulbs. Because just as it's a problem on Shabbat to turn it on, you'd be sort of over d'oraita, then so too, you would fulfill the mitzvah of creating fire for your Chanukiah with an incandescent bulb. Whereas an LED light bulb is not really doing very much for you.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, please.
I don't think Rabbi Linzer thinks that an incandescent light bulb is actual fire.
Yes, sorry, that is not really what I meant to say. It sort of falls under the category of actual fire. Is that better?
Because there's nothing, there's no oxygen in there because it's a vacuum, and the filament is not consumed like in fire.
Right, but it gets brighter.
It glows,
Yeah.
right? So it's more like fire than an LED, but he's
Right.
spoken in Skokie about it and has said that it's not fire and it's not boner.
Interesting. I'll send you the tshuva. So here he was saying that like that falls under the category of bona, but maybe it's not on a doraita level, but a dorabanan level. Whereas the LED lights are in just a different category altogether, a lesser category. But I'm certainly not an expert in LED or incandescent light bulbs. But so my understanding is that when in the hospital you light an LED menorah, that you should actually not say a bracha, because you are not actually lighting the Chanukiah in any sort of framework. And it would be better if you had someone lighting for you at home. Or if there was like a chaplain that was in the hospital that lit a Chanukiah with Aish, right? You'd sort of be like the achsanai of the hospital. And you could fulfill your mitzvah through that Chanukiah lighting for like all the residents around you. But that if you were able to get and use an incandescent Chanukiah, then you could say the brachot for yourself.
Okay.
And that would be true in a hospital also. So some of the other interesting things that I found that sort of intersect here, the question of working late, right? If you're working late, should your shaliach light candles for you? So the interesting distinction was Rav Ovadia Yosef says in his Tshuvot that appointing a messenger, right, allows you to be zariz l'mitzvah, to sort of rush to do the mitzvah, because as soon as your spouse lights candles for you at 4:53, you've done your mitzvah of lighting candles on Hanukkah. And that's preferable. Whereas the Shevet Halevi, another Acharon who is on the opposite side of the fence here, would say, well, actually, there's this principle that it's actually better to do mitzvot on your own, right? It's not better to do it with a shaliach on your behalf, but mitzvah bo yoter mi bishalo, that it's better for you to do it yourself. And so even if you're going to get home at 9:30 or 10:30 at night and everyone will be sleeping and you know there's no passersby, right? It's kind of a mitzvah of Pirsumei Nesa in name only, that it's still better for you to do your own mitzvah on your own behalf. But when thinking about these issues, right, you also have to think about like, will you be late every single day of the week? In which case, it might not feel like Hanukkah if your wife lights candles for you each night because you're late at work, or if your wife is really sad to light candles by herself, right? That maybe you should wait. It's better for both people to wait until it's later, even though technically it's better to light right away. And so there's a lot of considerations that go into that for sure. But what I found interesting, speaking only sort of from my own growing up perspective, growing up in a modern Orthodox environment, was the idea that like you could light candles whenever you wanted. I remember getting home late from a basketball game and sort of lighting on my own, or I would stay at my friend's house for Shabbat and I would light candles with her family. And there was never any framing of like, was I saying a bracha levatala, or should I have had my parents light on my behalf? And And then sort of on the flip side, when I went to college, I got written up for having candles in my room. The only time I ever got in trouble in 4 years of college was for lighting a menorah in my own room. Will is embarrassed to know me in the other room. Right. And so maybe then I really should have had my parents be my shaliach, because it was dangerous and it was breaking, campus policy. And if I was going to get in trouble, I should have done something more fun. And so it seems to me that this is something that we do really based on like an emotional instinct, as in it sort of separate from any kind of halacha around being zariz mitzvah, or it's better to have do your own mitzvah yourself, thinking about who's at home. But I also think that Hanukkah in some ways creates like a strong have and have not culture if you follow these halachot. Who has someone at home who can light for them? Who doesn't? Right? What if you're staying late at work and you're going home to be all alone? How painful would that be to have all of your coworkers say like, oh, well, my wife's lighting at home for me, I don't have to worry. And you're sort of thinking about how no one is there for you. What if you have no home? Something I hope to think a little bit more about and speak about after Light the Night, at the end of Light the Night, is like, what do we say to someone who doesn't have a home? If this is a mitzvah chafza, are they simply patur? Right, that's maybe the halachic way of thinking about it, but what does that mean for us to say that someone who doesn't have a home cannot light candles because home ownership or rentership or whatever it is sort of a necessity for that. The sort of halachic thought process, Rashi talks about people who are on a boat. It would not be considered their home. If they see a chanukah from the shoreline, they should say the second bracha, right? They can't say the hadli k'ner shel Chanukah because they're not doing that, but they could say the sha'asa nisim piece of the brachot, sort of from seeing that one. And in fact, we do say that if you walk past like a shul and you see that, you could say that second bracha. But I think that's a hard thing to think about. Not everyone is lucky enough to have a home. If you travel a lot, like if you don't really have a home just based on like the fact that you travel for work, or some people say, well, if you're in a hotel room, it's like become your house because you paid for it. It's like you rented it, right? And so thinking about what it really means that something is your home or is not your home is I think an interesting question that comes out of Hanukkah and out of this halachic discussion, but is not really fully addressed anywhere. And I hope, maybe, as I say this, I'm looking at the 5 Chanukiot on my table, knowing that my children are not actually obligated, and that's for chinuch purposes, I guess. But to think about, whether I would tell them not to light a Chanukiah because we were lighting at home on their behalf. I'm not sure how to bring maybe the halacha back into the conversation, is what I'm trying to say, without taking away the light of Hanukkah, which I think is beautiful. And growing up as an Ashkenazi, I think there's something beautiful about having 80 candles lit, on the last night of Hanukkah when you have a Hanukkah party. But I'm not sure that that's actually like the right approach or the right answer. So I welcome people's thoughts if you'd like.
But that's sort of nice about all these different socks that most of them are like, that's the psak, but really people do it different ways. Don't say anything. Just, it's all fine. It's all good. So, there wasn't really anyone who said, no, this is the way you have to do it. And if you don't do it this way, you're wrong.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I think the other thing is like Hanukkah is not going to be anyone's like hill to die on, because it's kind of low stakes, right? It's not deoraita. It doesn't feel like that kind of heavy thing. And I think at the end of the day, like Pirsume Nisa is Pirsume Nisa, right? It's a good thing to have candles lit in windows, and so maybe that's sort of a nod to that as well. But yeah, there does seem to be a lot of sort of healthy debate. All right. Well, thanks for coming, hanging in there through on the first night of Hanukkah. I hope everyone lights candles in the way that feels appropriate to them, in the right place and at the right time, and with the right people around them. and that we bring lots of light to the coming week. And I look forward to seeing many of you in what I fear is very, very cold weather over Shabbat and Sunday.
Bundle up.
But there'll be the glow of Hanukkah to warm
That's
your
right,
heart.
to warm us up, all those Chanukkiot that are lit. So
Yes.
Chag Urim Sameach, and have a good night, and I'll see you soon.
Okay,
Hanukkah
good night.
Sameach.
Hanukkah Sameach, yeah.